Welcome back to the channel, Crypto Trend Trader, with a quick update on Bitcoin. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you it's not financial advice. I'm not your financial advisor. These markets are extremely volatile, so please do your own research and trade responsibly. All right, so basically we got that sell-off from the last video. We were talking about basically a retest, and what we needed to do was see, did we put in a higher low or a lower low, and the reaction off of it. We then proceeded to put in two more lows that were higher than the initial sell-off reaction rally, and then we were able to consolidate here above our blue Fibonacci level, at which point in time we consolidated long enough, got the retest back up to the breakdown, came back down and held support again and again, kept that higher low, at which point in time we rallied, and then when we broke through this area here, we were able to get the test up and basically came back up, consolidated long enough at our key resistance breakdown point, and then continued to float up to the top. I was less aggressive from this point here and had taken profits on my trades, as I was not expecting it to get up this high. But we did actually come all the way back up and retest the yellow parabolic trend line breakdown, as well as the green line, which came into line perfectly with the 886 of this little sell-off down here. So we came all the way back up to 886, put in a lower high, sold back off to the 618 between the 0.5, found support, and now we're just at like a key decision point and key indecision in the market. And if you're familiar with my channel and you've been around for a while, we have been in this situation a few times now throughout the trend, and this is a key situation. So what I'm doing here is pulling up a different chart. You've never seen this before, but basically what this does is it shows our long-term weekly trends and essentially what's going on. And as many of you know, we took this massive sell-off here short and then closed out down here, took another short from here and closed out down here. I'm not even talking about the longs, but we also shorted this area and closed out down in here. So you now have, every time we've come up to this key trend line, we've taken a short off of it, and now here we are at that same level again. We hit indecision, but when we closed the weekly, we closed again inside of this on like our CMEs. We're retesting the yellow parabolic trend line that we broke down from, which is what we would expect to do, but there's just so much resistance in place right here, and our oscillator indicators are all like, I mean, we're getting the buy, but this is the least reliable buy on the weekly time frame. If you get this purple sell right here, it's often a fake out, and if you get the blue buy, it's often a fake out without the preceding movement up to it. So like basically, if you don't get the green leading up to it or the red leading up to it, it means it's not over or under a certain point, like whatever you're calling like your bullish or bearish control zone, at which point in time it won't light up like the accumulation or distribution zone. So then when you get the buy or sell signal, it's much less reliable. So it doesn't mean that you can't take these signals, it just means they're much less reliable. And then typically what we look for is confluence with like other things to tell us should we take these signals as reliable or not. And if you're getting a buy signal typically at a key level of resistance, it's typically a fake out. The same way if you're getting a sell signal after a sell-off at a key level of support, it's often a fake out or like a false signal, not even necessarily a fake out. But once we flip this blue on the TJD, TD, MACD on the weekly, we flip this blue back over negative. Obviously once we start getting these histograms turning red right here, we know the trend is basically topping out, and then as it sells off, we would expect it to find some support here on the blue like we talked about, which we did. We got a nice little bounce off of it and then sell off. And then this was essentially at bottoming out, coming back for the retest, and then it gets denied by the blue right here at the resistance, and then sells off. So then that was our massive sell-off right here, and then when we flip the histogram back over green again, that was our run up here, and now where are we at? We're right back at the red. So now typically what's going to happen is the blue is going to act less of resistance because it's in line with the overall trend, as where the red is going to act as more of resistance if you're underneath it. The same way that if you're on top of it, the blue is going to act more like support, and the red is going to not act like support. So essentially what's happening here is, we're in that situation now. We're coming back up for the retest that we just got only now there's less of a chance based on statistics that we're going to get the break through it. So if we got denied off of the blue, which is not acting as resistance nearly as much as the red, that would tell us that when we come up and hit the red here, we have the negative slope on this trend line. So what we would expect to do is we hit it, find resistance, and sell back off, and then we get a more powerful sell off. And then typically when you flip this from blue to red, it's not just going for a quick little period. I mean, here it was March to March. So that was a year it was red for. And then, basically the same thing here again, March to March. So that was a year it was blue for. So, I mean, based on that, and the amount of time that this thing tends to flip over for, that's saying that we basically have just started our downtrend. And if we just started our downtrend based on this, and we're at, basically like near the top of all of this resistance, the top of this cone and everything, what that tells me is that this is a great area to be taking shorts or taking profits, because what's most likely to happen at this point in time is we're most likely to get a violent sell-off back down to the bottom of this cone. And now that's weekly indicators, and essentially what's happening right here is we basically are getting the long-term cross between the weekly stochastics, and we've already gotten the short-term cross between the that's the weekly and the monthly. Weekly, so this is the monthly and that's the weekly. So the weekly just got the cross to the upside, and the monthly is crossing to the upside. So I mean, it's definitely saying there's potential for long-term continuation of this trend, but we really need to see what happens here at this key resistance. Do we break through, come back down, find support, and then consolidate and move up, or do we find resistance like we've been finding for the last 3 years and multiple times, hitting this top trend line and sell back off down to the bottom, regain strength and go back up? And there's a lot of new money in the market, which accounts for this, I think, right here, based on like having hype and all that stuff. But essentially, what tends to happen is the market tends to do the opposite of what people think is going to happen. So if people think the halving is a bullish event, so it's going to push price up, we tend to get like the sell-off down and wreck those people. So, but we'll see. We're not going to base anything off of luck. We're going to base it off of technical analysis. So. And then if we look at basically what we have going on here, this just shows us the similarity between the 20,000 top and our current one. We basically max out at 20,000 and sell off, and we started forming like this cone, descending, broadening wedge. So we're basically, it's getting wider as it goes down, and we keep bouncing between it. And it's harder to tell on the weekly time frame how much interaction we get with it, but we're basically bouncing between it, and then finally we start putting in like a bottom area right here, and we're able to retest the top and actually break through it, and then we come back down and find support on it. But you'll see we get like the measured move breakout to the top out of it, and then we get the measured move sell off down to the bottom, and then we actually put in a new low, and then we start forming once we come back up for the retest, and then we get the breakout, we start forming this other triangle basically pattern, and then it slowly gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then we get the breakdown capitulation. So now you can look at the similarities between what happened at our 14,000 top here. We basically top out and we start putting in this descending broadening wedge, and we're doing the exact same thing that we did back here. And now if you look right here, essentially what's happening is we've come back up for the retest. We would expect us to come back down, sell off back down to the bottom here, and put in a floor again, potentially a higher low, potentially a lower low based on candle closes. So if we were going to do the same thing, we would put in a higher low, but we would put a lower close in. So we would expect it to come down to like the 786 at like 4,800 or like 4,300 or something like that, but not take out the wick, but close lower than the close on the weekly. So that would put us down at like this area right here, like 47, 4,800, somewhere around there. Now alternatively, what could happen right here, this could be like the inflection point between the two triangles. So instead of being right here, we're actually right here. So what happens is we get the breakout above here, and then we come back down and we basically just retest the trend line down, the red trend line that's at the top. So in this case, the red trend line would be this line right here that continues to go through. So we would basically sell off, continue up right here, probably put in a new high over this 10.5 range. And then when we sell off, we would just stay on top of these descending trend lines. So we would continue to find them as support, but stay on top of them and not go back down inside of the descending broadening wedge. But now more realistically, if we don't do that, what would happen is we would stay inside of our pattern right here. So that just giving me like a little bit of an idea, try to compare in essence what's happening and what we can expect to happen, versus just like breaking out the top right here and then just going to the moon, which again is possible, but typically what happens in these situations is you'll break out and consolidate above the breakout point, find it as support, and then that's a great time for you to like accumulate before the massive long-term move. But what's happening right now is our long-term time frames are getting to the point where we have to be very careful, because they're going to start putting off signals that will either lead to extended bull markets that last for years, or massive fake outs that completely wreck people. And statistically what happens is, in a situation like this where we're not putting in higher highs, statistically what's going to happen is we're going to continue putting in lower highs. We're going to continue in this downtrend accumulation or distribution pattern until we don't. So there you have it, guys. Crypto Trend Trader, a little bit of our long-term technical analysis. In the meantime, just flipping back over here, what I would expect to happen is we got the retest of the breakdown points. Unless we can take out this 886 and take out the high right here and continue to the upside, the most likely thing that's going to happen is we continue to put in like lower highs from the previous high right here. So we put in a lower high, we put in another lower high, and then come back down here, retest the yellow trend line, probably float back up on that, and then we can kind of play it by there. But at this point in time, what this is looking like is just like a spring situation where we busted through a key level of resistance, couldn't maintain it, and someone used it as an opportunity to basically get out of their positions, and then price just slowly floated back up, filled the gap, retested the breakdown point of multiple parabolic trend lines, and then now we're just starting to float back down here again. And if we spend enough time consolidating right here, one of two things is going to happen. Somebody's going to get scared and dump their position, and we'll get that retest down here, or somebody's going to get bullish and say, oh, this is it, the oscillator's reset long enough, and then we can get a bullish move back to the upside. So, well, there you have it, guys. Crypto Trend Trader, quick update on Bitcoin. And based on the shorter term TJD, TD, MACD, the histogram is red, the slope is red, and we're selling off. We could expect this to be or to shortly find like a little bounce off that, but I would expect continued sell off to the downside. Crypto Trend Trader, and I'm out of here.